Hello, and welcome back to the Imperfect Person podcast. I am your host, Tori Aletto, and today's topic is called Being in the Mess. And I decided to do this topic tonight because I am quite literally in the mess. And it is the most authentic that I can be right now. So, okay, let's just talk about what does it mean to be in the mess? It's like when you're in the thick of something, right? Because so often we talk about things in the aftermath when we are, in a better place, when we've let go, when we're doing well. And I'm going to share honesty in how I navigate the middle, the messy parts, kind of being right in the thick of it. So I'm going to walk you through kind of what my pattern looks like. And I'm hoping that you can identify yours as I'm talking about mine. And then we can kind of just move through what it looks like to live and be human, right? Because that's what being in the mess is. So for me, my mess always starts with me automatically engaging in my what I call old protective behaviors. These are behaviors created in childhood that protect us from pain, hard feelings, hard situations, hard emotions. They're behaviors that we engage in that often lead us towards self-abandonment, right? Because when we want to disconnect to hard feelings, we're often disconnecting from ourselves, our bodies, all of that. So that's what I do that's where my mess begins. I automatically engage in my old protective behaviors. And for me, that looks a lot like avoidance, numbing, procrastination. Like that's my jam. Those are my protective behaviors. Like I'll whip out a phone and look at I don't know what for a very long time. So that's where it all begins. So I start to engage in these behaviors more often. And then what happens is when all of my alone time, or when I'm just stealing moments of time to do these behaviors, I am slowly disconnecting from myself. And when I'm disconnected from myself, I become more irritable. I become less creative. It becomes a really challenge for me to be present in my relationships or with my kids. I just want to, have space and be disconnected. I start to go down this like rabbit hole, so to speak. And I know it quite well. It's like a story and it's a true story. Some of it's true, at least, where I'm just being pulled in so many directions and I'm overstimulated and I'm scattered and I just need to disconnect. Really, what I need is self connection. But in those moments, my first stop is disconnection. And it's in those behaviors. So then where this starts to shift, right? Because this is a really important piece. We can continue in that mess for a very long time. The big part or the most important part is when I start to notice these patterns. So it's like this little part of me that like rises above them. Instead of being in them, in the depths of them, which I am often, there's a part of me that goes, oh, wait a minute. I know these patterns. I know them really well. And I'm in them. I'm in the thick of them. I can feel it. I know the feeling in my body when I'm in these patterns. I'm like, the feeling of disconnection for me is very like anxious, down, blah. Like I said, I'm not creative, which is why you'll see me take random breaks off of Instagram because when I'm disconnected, I can't connect to the part of me that is creative that wants to write. So I start to notice this sort of sluggish part of me that I am trying to procrastinate and numb away from. So that noticing is key because that noticing is the pathway back. Now, sometimes I notice, and for instance, any parents that can relate, I don't have the time to self connect sometimes. COVID kids, it's not a good combination for self care. Or probably for many of you in different circumstances. But here's the thing. At some point, it becomes a necessity. Like self connection becomes the route. Because if I'm too disconnected, I'm more reactive, I'm more down, I'm more anxious, I'm more avoidant, and my stories about my worth and what I'm capable of get loud. And that's when I know it's time. So when I'm able to finally notice those patterns instead of feeling stuck in them, I carve out time to sit with myself. This is the time where I'm connecting back to my body and eventually my feelings. Because here's the thing, we have primary and secondary emotional experiences, right? So for me, when I pause in these kind of moments, the first thing I feel is anxiety. I'm anxious, which is why I procrastinate or numb because I don't want to feel anxiety, right? But when I sit with anxiety long enough, it reveals itself. And I've been doing this for a while. So don't feel bad if you're like, what do you mean reveals itself? Everyone has their own path here. But for me, if I sit with it for a bit and I'm like, and I'm feeling it through and I'm breathing and I'm kind of sitting with the body, it will reveal as irritation, annoyance, and then all of a sudden it sort of progresses. And that's when I discover what's underlying these patterns. Oftentimes it's sadness, like deep sadness, grieving, it's shame, it's loneliness. Often it's like a deep sadness or it's shame, loneliness, whatever it is, I'm grieving, I'm discovering the underlayers, right? Because there's so many layers here. It's like protective behaviors, anxiety, stress, or whatever your first primary emotion is. And then that secondary stuff is what we want to get to. What is happening here? And when I tap into that, I often either cry, vent. Sometimes I get really frustrated, and I'll, yell, not at someone, but just like, oh, like getting it all out. Sometimes I sleep and lay down. Sometimes I force myself to go outside and connect with nature. It varies, but I do whatever I can to move through it, to allow my body to experience it. And again, what I need in those moments varies. It does. Sometimes I'm laying in bed for an hour with meditation music. And sometimes, I get up and I rally and get outside or whatever it is. Sometimes this looks like my kids watching a lot of TV. Sometimes this looks like my house being a gigantic disaster. Often, when I'm carving time out for myself, things are going messy around me, or I'm missing work deadlines, or whatever it is. Things are messy around me, but I know it's often the pathway back. It's a necessity, actually, for me to get back to myself. So that's something that I have come to accept about carving out time for self connection is you're often neglecting something else, but it's vital because that something else needs connection. It needs your self connection first and foremost. So I have to allow that and give that permission to exist, to carve this time out for myself. And when I experience that, at some point it leads me to the next phase, which I will say is, what do I need to do here? Is this something? Sometimes it's just feeling and saying it out loud and accepting or venting, just getting whatever's in there out. And sometimes that's enough. Other times it turns into this like compassionate but radical accountability for what do I need to do in this position? Is there anything that I can do? Is there something that I can change here that I want to, work on or heal or grow in me to shift this situation or help myself or whatever it is? It always leads to that next step for me because I do believe that self connection is a combination of empathy, love, and feeling alongside accountability, honesty, and self reflection. I think those come together. Um, so that would be like my last step. But here's the thing, if I move through the mess in this way, and I notice that I'm starting to fall back into my protective behaviors, like I'm like, oh, this is what I need to do. And then tomorrow I wake up and I'm procrastinating again. It is an alert for me that I have not spent enough time with whatever I need to spend time with. I don't shame myself for it. I don't call myself lazy anymore for it. What I do is I honor what's happening within me. I need to spend more time here. And that's sometimes, I'll engage, back with in therapy, or, I'll just continue to spend time with me, or I'll talk to whatever it is. And however I do that looks different every time. But I know that it's a space where when protective behaviors are around, I need to spend time with me and figure out what's going on and get curious and feel stuff and often do stuff. If I, set up some goals or decide I'm going to do it and I'm on it, I know I've moved through a cycle of a mess. And then I kind of proactively get going. And what I notice is I slowly start to feel like me again. I feel connected again, engaged again, clear, calmer again. My rational mind comes back and reminds me of all those false stories being false. It reminds me of me. And what happens with me as someone who really enjoys being creative is I get naturally creative again, which, again, if you follow me on Instagram and my therapist, you'll see me pump out a few posts in one day and then I disappear. Now you know why. Because I'm dealing with my mess. And that's just how I operate. Another key point that I want to say here is I used to define myself as this cycle. So when I was procrastinating or avoiding or whatever, I was lazy, excuse me, and like off and down and, oh, here I go again, here I am. I used to define myself as that part of me. And then if I came around the cycle and I started to feel calm and creative and excited again, I would define myself as me, as that person. Like, oh, finally, I'm happy again. This is me. I made it. I'm never going to get back to that other part of me because this is me. And what I found is if you overly identify with any of these parts of you, what happens is you're always going up and down in thinking that your happiness or where you are is actually the real you. And I know for a fact that many of us identify with the sadder, protective part of us. Like we are like, oh, here they are again. I'm depressed again, or I'm anxious again, or I'm procrastinating again. This is the real me. When in fact, these are all parts of who we are. So, what I've come to do in all of this and in all of the mess is I acknowledge me as the person who meets all these different parts of me. I am the person who notices and meets my avoidance. I am the person who notices and meets my procrastination. I am the person responsible for holding me accountable. And I'm the person who, kind of comes alive when I'm creative. But I am the person that meets all these parts of me. And that reframe in itself is so vital because it allows us to be human. It allows me to be human. If I didn't give myself that permission, the mess would take over. Surely I would get stuck in those protective parts for far longer because I'm overly identifying as them. So I hope that kind of hits you in a certain place. I hope you can kind of start to look at your mess, whether you're in the middle of it right now, or you're just starting it, or you're coming out of it, wherever you are. I hope you can see yourself as the person or the part of you that's meeting all these layers of you. And wherever you are in your mess, know that this is what it is to be human. There is no person on this planet always at their A game. Likely, if you see someone that's always on their A game, that's protective behaviors for them. I know many people who can't rest or log off Instagram or take a break because their protective behaviors are saying, go, 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 work, 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 do, 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 busy, busy, busy. Mine are a heck of a lot lazier. But my point is, there is no human that's not doing this work. So if we can understand that being human is managing our mess and identifying with the role of the person and who we want to be when we manage our mess, we can give ourselves a lot more grace and we can move through these stages a heck of a lot easier than when we're so hard on ourselves for being human. Thanks for being with me in the middle of my mess. Um, I do, for anyone asking, have a website coming. It will come and I will likely announce it on my Instagram and my therapist when it's officially up. I will get there, but I have a webinar coming up this Saturday. It's about letting go. So if you are looking to let someone or something go and come back to you, this is a really different way of looking at that process. Come join me. And the link is in the bio. And if you can't come live, it is recorded and sent to you. And I hope to see you guys there. Thanks so much.